On a bright Tuesday morning in September, Dr. Sarah Mitchell stood in front of her bathroom mirror, adjusting her navy blue blazer one last time. At 42 years old, she had worked hard to reach the top of the tech industry. Her dark brown eyes looked back at her with determination, the same look she'd carried since she was a young girl dreaming big dreams in her small hometown of Memphis. Today was supposed to be like any other business day for Sarah. As the CEO of Tech Vision Solutions, one of Silicon Valley's fastest-growing cybersecurity companies, she was used to early mornings and packed schedules. Her driver, Marcus, was already waiting outside her San Francisco penthouse to take her to the private airport where her chartered jet would be waiting. "Good morning, Dr. Mitchell," Marcus said warmly as she stepped into the black Mercedes. He had been her driver for 3 years and always admired how she carried herself with such grace and professionalism. "Good morning, Marcus," Sarah replied with a genuine smile. "How's your daughter doing in her new school?" This was typical of Sarah. Even with her busy schedule, she always remembered personal details about the people around her. It was one of the many qualities that had helped her build such a successful company from the ground up. During the 40-minute drive to the private airport, Sarah reviewed her presentation on her tablet. She was heading to New York for an important meeting with potential investors. Her company had developed new security software that could protect businesses from cyber attacks better than anything else on the market. The meeting could mean a $50 million investment for Tech Vision Solutions. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from her mother. "Good luck today, baby girl. You got this." A warm feeling spread through her chest. Her parents had always been her biggest supporters, working multiple jobs to put her through college at MIT. Their sacrifice and faith in her had paid off. She had graduated at the top of her class and gone on to earn her PhD in computer science. The car pulled up to a late private aviation services, where Sarah had been a regular client for the past 2 years. She checked her watch, 7:45 a.m., right on schedule. Her flight was set for 8:30 a.m., giving her plenty of time for the usual security procedures. "Have a great trip, Dr. Mitchell," Marcus said as he helped her with her designer carry-on bag. "I'll see you when you return tomorrow evening." Sarah walked confidently toward the terminal entrance, her heels clicking against the polished floor. She was wearing one of her favorite power suits, the navy blue blazer and matching pants, with a white silk blouse underneath. Her natural hair was styled in neat, professional braids, and she wore simple pearl earrings that had been a gift from her grandmother. At the entrance, she noticed a security guard she hadn't seen before. Something about his stance made her slightly uneasy, but she pushed the feeling aside. After 15 years in the tech industry, Sarah had learned to deal with all kinds of people and situations. She reached into her bag for her identification documents, her driver's license, passport, and elite aviation membership card. She always kept everything organized and easily accessible. As she approached the security desk, she put on her usual friendly smile. Sarah could see other executives entering the terminal. There was Tom Patterson, a venture capitalist she knew from several tech conferences, walking through with just a quick nod from the guard. Linda Weber from a competing tech firm passed through moments later, barely having to slow down. The morning sun streamed through the terminal's large windows, creating a warm glow throughout the space. Sarah could see her chartered jet through the glass, a sleek Gulfstream G650 that would take her to New York in style and comfort. She had worked hard to afford such luxuries, building her company from a small startup in her garage to a corporation now valued at over $200 million. Little did Sarah know that in the next few minutes, her ordinary business trip would turn into something that would shake the private aviation industry to its core. As she stepped forward to present her credentials, she was about to face a situation that would not only test her personal strength, but would also spark a movement for change in an industry that desperately needed it. Back in her office, her team was preparing for the New York presentation, unaware that their CEO was about to become the center of a story that would make national headlines. The security guard at the desk shifted his stance, and the next few moments would change everything. Security guard James Henderson stood at his post, his face hardening as Dr. Sarah Mitchell approached. Despite her professional appearance and ready documentation, he stepped forward with an air of unwarranted suspicion. His 6-foot frame deliberately blocked the entrance, making his presence impossible to ignore. "ID and credentials," Henderson barked, his tone sharper than the one he'd used with previous passengers. Sarah calmly handed over her perfectly organized documents, maintaining her professional composure despite his hostile demeanor. "Is there a problem?" she asked politely, noticing how his eyes narrowed as he flipped through her identification cards repeatedly. The guard's radio crackled at his hip, but he ignored it, focusing instead on scrutinizing every detail of her documents with exaggerated care. "These could be fake," Henderson declared loudly, causing several heads to turn in their direction. "We get a lot of people trying to sneak in here who don't belong." His emphasis on the word belong made his meaning crystal clear to everyone within earshot. Sarah took a deep breath, her heart racing but her voice remaining steady. "Sir, I'm a regular client here at Elite Aviation. You can verify my membership in your system. I have a flight scheduled for 8:30 a.m. to New York." Henderson ignored her explanation and picked up his phone. "I need to call this in," he announced, despite having let several other executives pass without so much as a second glance at their IDs. The growing line of people behind Sarah shifted uncomfortably, witnessing the obvious discrimination unfolding before them. Tom Patterson, who had passed through security moments earlier, stepped back toward the desk. "James, what's the holdup? Dr. Mitchell is a respected CEO. I've seen her here numerous times." The guard barely acknowledged Tom's intervention. "Sir, I'm just doing my job. Security protocols must be followed." Yet these same protocols hadn't been applied to any other passengers that morning. Sarah quietly reached for her phone and began recording the interaction. She had learned long ago that documentation was often the only defense against such treatment. As she did this, Linda Weber also stepped forward from the waiting area. "This is ridiculous," Linda declared. "I've been flying from this terminal for 5 years, and I've never seen anyone's credentials checked this extensively. Dr. Mitchell is a more frequent flyer than I am." The situation was drawing more attention now. Other passengers had stopped to watch, some pulling out their phones to record the incident. Sarah could see the cleaning staff and baggage handlers pausing their work to observe, their faces showing a mix of concern and recognition of a sadly familiar scene. Henderson's face reddened, but he doubled down. "I need to see additional forms of identification," he insisted. "And proof of your business in New York. Who are you meeting with? What's the purpose of your trip?" Sarah's hand trembled slightly as she held her phone, but her voice remained clear and professional. "Sir, no other passenger has been asked to provide their meeting details or justify their travel. I've shown you my Elite Aviation membership card, my driver's license, my passport, and my company ID. I'm the CEO of TechVision Solutions, heading to New York for a business meeting. That should be more than sufficient." The terminal manager, alerted by the growing crowd, finally hurried over to the scene. Alice Cooper, a middle-aged woman with graying hair, immediately recognized Sarah from her many previous flights. "Dr. Mitchell, I'm so sorry for this inconvenience," Alice said, shooting a sharp look at Henderson. "Of course your credentials are in order. Please, go right through." But Sarah stood her ground, her phone still recording. "Miss Cooper, I appreciate your intervention, but we need to address what's happening here. Your security guard has created 2 separate standards for passengers, one for me and another for everyone else." The morning sun now felt uncomfortably warm through the terminal windows. Sarah's 8:30 a.m. flight was just minutes away, but something more important than a business meeting was taking place. Years of similar experiences, both large and small, had prepared her for this moment. As other passengers continued recording the scene, Sarah could see her own reflection in the terminal's windows. A successful black woman standing tall in her power suit, refusing to accept discriminatory treatment. The next few minutes would transform this private aviation terminal from a place of luxury travel into ground zero for a much-needed conversation about systemic racism in exclusive spaces. Henderson shifted uncomfortably, perhaps finally realizing that his actions would have consequences. But for Sarah and the growing audience of witnesses, this confrontation was about to become much more than a single incident at an airport security desk. For 5 long minutes, the private terminal at Elite Aviation Services fell into an uncomfortable silence. Dr. Sarah Mitchell stood firmly in place, her phone steady in her hand as she continued recording. The morning sun cast long shadows across the polished floor, and the tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. Terminal manager Alice Cooper nervously glanced between Sarah and security guard Henderson, who remained stubbornly positioned at his desk. The growing crowd of witnesses had created an unexpected audience for this morning's drama, with at least a dozen phones now recording the scene. "Miss Cooper," Sarah spoke clearly, her voice carrying across the quiet terminal, "I'd like to formally report this discriminatory treatment. Every white passenger this morning walked through with a simple ID check, while I've been held here for over 15 minutes and asked to prove my right to exist in this space." Tom Patterson stepped forward again, his laptop bag still in hand. "I'm happy to provide a witness statement. I've been flying from this terminal for 3 years, and I've never once been asked about my meeting details or had my ID checked multiple times." Linda Weber nodded in agreement. "I have video of the last 10 minutes showing the different treatment. This is textbook discrimination, and it needs to be addressed." Henderson's face had turned a deep shade of red. "I was just following security protocols," he began, but Sarah cut him off firmly. "Please show me these protocols in writing," she requested, her voice remaining professional but firm. "I'd like to see the official document stating that some passengers must provide their business itineraries, while others don't need to show any additional documentation at all." The security guard fell silent, unable to produce any such documentation. Sarah's phone continued recording as she turned to address the other passengers who had gathered around. "This is exactly why spaces like this remain exclusive," she said, her voice carrying emotion but maintaining its strength. "It's not just about having the money to afford private travel. It's about whether you're allowed to exist in these spaces without having your presence questioned." A young black woman who worked at the coffee kiosk inside the terminal had tears in her eyes as she watched. She had seen similar situations before, but had never witnessed someone stand up so boldly against the discrimination. Alice Cooper, realizing the severity of the situation, finally took decisive action. "Mr. Henderson, please step into my office immediately," she ordered. Turning to Sarah, she added, "Dr. Mitchell, I assure you this will be thoroughly investigated. We have cameras covering this entire area and will review all footage." But Sarah wasn't finished. She pulled up her email on her phone and began typing while still recording with her other hand. "I'm forwarding this video to my legal team, the Aviation Board of Directors, and the Civil Rights Commission," she announced. "This isn't about one security guard or one incident. This is about systemic discrimination that needs to be addressed at every level." Several of the other passengers who had witnessed the scene began sharing their contact information with Sarah, offering to provide statements about what they had observed. The young barista walked over during her break and quietly thanked Sarah for taking a stand. "Dr. Mitchell," Tom Patterson said, "I sit on the board of the Private Aviation Association. With your permission, I'd like to bring this up at our next meeting. We need industry-wide changes in security protocols and training." Sarah nodded, finally lowering her phone as Henderson disappeared into the manager's office. She checked her watch. Her 8:30 a.m. meeting in New York would have to be rescheduled, but she knew this moment was more important than any business deal. Linda Weber stepped forward with her business card. "My company would be interested in partnering with you on any initiatives you plan to launch around this issue. This isn't just your fight." As the crowd began to disperse, Sarah remained standing tall in her navy blue suit, her phone now containing irrefutable evidence of the discrimination she had faced. She had missed her flight, but she had sparked something much bigger than a business trip. "I'll need all witness statements sent to my office by the end of the day," she announced to those who had offered to help. "This isn't going to be swept under the rug or resolved with a simple apology. We're going to use this moment to create real change." The morning sun had risen higher now, and Sarah's phone was buzzing with messages from her team in New York. But as she stood in that terminal, she knew that sometimes the most important meetings aren't the ones on your calendar. They're the moments when you're called to take a stand for something bigger than yourself. By noon that same day, Dr. Sarah Mitchell's video had spread across social media like wildfire. She sat in her office at Tech Vision Solutions, watching the view count climb into the hundreds of thousands. Her phone hadn't stopped ringing since she'd left the airport 3 hours ago. "Dr. Mitchell," her assistant Rachel knocked on the door. "CNN is on line 1, and we've received interview requests from every major news network. Your video has been shared by 3 celebrities and multiple civil rights organizations." Sarah took a deep breath, looking at the wall of awards in her office, achievements that hadn't protected her from discrimination. Her rescheduled New York meeting was now a video call scheduled for tomorrow, and her investors have been surprisingly understanding about the delay. The security company just released their statement, Rachel said, handing Sarah her tablet. The screen showed Elite Aviation Services' official response. We take these allegations seriously and are conducting a thorough investigation. The security officer in question has been placed on administrative leave pending review. Sarah shook her head at the corporate jargon. They're calling them allegations, even though there's clear video evidence and multiple witnesses, she noted, typing quick notes on her laptop. Her office phone buzzed again. This time it was Linda Weber, the executive who had witnessed the incident. Sarah, I just posted my own video of what happened. My company's board wants to issue a joint statement condemning discriminatory practices in private aviation. We need to strike while this story is hot. Outside Sarah's office window, she could see news vans gathering in front of her building. The story had grown bigger than she'd expected, touching a nerve in a country still grappling with systemic racism in elite spaces. Her phone dinged with a text message from Tom Patterson. Emergency board meeting call for Private Aviation Association. Your video was shared in the group chat. Changes are coming. The young barista from the airport terminal had also gone viral after posting her own tearful video, describing similar incidents she witnessed during her 2 years working there. Her tweet had gained thousands of retweets, adding another layer to the growing story. Sarah's mother called next. Baby, I just saw the video. Her voice cracked with emotion. I'm so proud of you for standing your ground. Your father's been crying all morning, seeing his little girl fight the same battles we fought, but doing it your way. By mid-afternoon, #Elite Aviation Discrimination was trending nationwide. Civil rights lawyers had begun reaching out, offering to take the case pro bono. Sarah had already contacted her own legal team, but she was thinking bigger than just a lawsuit. Rachel, she called her assistant, set up a meeting with our PR team. I want to launch a full campaign about discrimination in exclusive spaces. Get me statistics on minority representation in private aviation, both as passengers and employees. The terminal manager, Alice Cooper, had sent an email apologizing profusely and informing Sarah that security guard Henderson had been terminated. But Sarah knew firing one guard wouldn't solve the deeper problems. A new email popped up from a group of black executives from various industries, sharing their own similar experiences with private aviation. They wanted to form a coalition to address systemic discrimination in luxury services. Dr. Mitchell, Rachel appeared at the door again. The Aviation Board of Directors is requesting an emergency meeting with you tomorrow. They want to discuss implementing new industry-wide security protocols and training programs. Sarah looked at her phone. Over 50 missed calls, hundreds of text messages, and thousands of social media notifications. Her simple stand that morning had unleashed a flood of similar stories and a demand for change. Just then, her office TV showed breaking news. Discrimination at Elite Aviation goes viral. CEOs stand sparks national conversation. The screen showed clips from her video, followed by interviews with aviation industry experts discussing the need for reform. Rachel, Sarah said finally, clear my schedule for the next few days. Tell the PR team I'll need that meeting first thing tomorrow morning. And get me data on every private aviation company's diversity training programs, or lack thereof. As the afternoon sun cast long shadows across her office, Sarah realized that her missed flight to New York had set something much bigger in motion. What started as one woman's stand against discrimination was quickly becoming a movement for systematic change in an industry that had operated in the shadows for too long. Her computer chimed with another email, this time from a major aviation industry publication requesting her contribution for their cover story. The headline would read, "The Flight That Never Took Off: How One CEO's Stand is Changing Private Aviation." 1 week after the incident, Dr. Sarah Mitchell sat in a large conference room at the Aviation Board's headquarters in Washington, D.C. Around her sat 12 board members, all paying close attention as an independent investigator presented his preliminary findings. After reviewing security footage from the past 6 months, the investigator, Mark Thompson, explained while showing slides on a large screen, "We found 142 incidents of discriminatory treatment at private airports across the country." Dr. Mitchell's experience wasn't an isolated case. The room fell silent as security videos played on the screen, showing similar scenarios playing out at different private terminals. Black executives being stopped, questioned extensively, and sometimes even turned away despite having proper credentials. Our investigation has revealed a disturbing pattern, Thompson continued, clicking through his presentation. Minority passengers are 3 times more likely to face additional security checks, and 5 times more likely to be asked about their travel purposes. Sarah watched as several board members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. She had spent the past week collecting stories from other executives who had faced similar discrimination, building a database that now contained over 200 documented incidents. The most concerning finding, Thompson added, pulling up a new slide, is that these incidents weren't random. We found internal communications suggesting an unofficial policy of extra screening for passengers who didn't fit the usual client profile. Tom Patterson, who had witnessed Sarah's incident, spoke up from his seat on the board. How many private aviation companies were involved in these discriminatory practices? Out of the 25 major private aviation companies we investigated, Thompson replied, 23 showed similar patterns of behavior. Only 2 had proper diversity training and clear, consistently applied security protocols. Sarah opened her laptop and shared her own screen. I've received over 500 emails from minority executives sharing their experiences, she explained. Many stopped using private aviation services altogether after facing repeated discrimination. The investigation had grown beyond just security practices. Records showed that out of 1,200 private aviation security staff nationwide, only 6% were people of color. Management positions showed even worse statistics. Linda Weber, who had been invited to present her company's findings, stood up next. We've analyzed the economic impact of these discriminatory practices, she said. Our research shows the private aviation industry is losing an estimated $300 million annually by alienating minority executives and their companies. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from Rachel, her assistant. The New York Times is running tomorrow's front-page story about the investigation. They want your comment on the findings. The board members looked through the thick reports in front of them, containing hundreds of pages of evidence, testimonies, and statistical analysis. What had started as one incident had uncovered an industry-wide problem that could no longer be ignored. There's more, Thompson said, pulling up another slide. We found that several insurance companies offer lower premiums to private aviation companies that engage in these discriminatory practices, calling it enhanced security measures. The revelation caused an audible gasp in the room. Sarah made a note to have her legal team look into potential lawsuits against these insurance companies. Dr. Mitchell, the board chairman, addressed her directly. Your incident has opened Pandora's box. We've discovered systemic issues that go far beyond one security guard or one terminal. Sarah nodded, thinking about the young barista who had first supported her. After sharing her story, the young woman had received hundreds of job offers and was now working as a diversity consultant for a major airline. The evidence is clear, Thompson concluded, showing his final slide. This investigation has revealed a network of informal policies and practices designed to maintain exclusive spaces through discriminatory means. It's not just about security, it's about who gets to belong in these spaces. As the presentation ended, Sarah stood up to address the board. These findings confirm what many of us have known for years, she said. The question now is, what are we going to do about it? The chairman looked around the room, meeting the eyes of each board member. We'll need to make sweeping changes, he admitted. This report cannot be ignored. Outside the conference room windows, the Washington Monument stood tall in the distance, a reminder of both America's ideals and its ongoing struggles with equality. The investigation had done its job, exposing the truth. Now came the harder part, creating real, lasting change in an industry that had operated under discriminatory practices for far too long. Sarah closed her laptop, knowing that this investigation was just the beginning. The evidence was irrefutable, and the spotlight was now firmly on the private aviation industry. The next steps would determine whether this moment would lead to genuine transformation or become just another report gathering dust on a shelf. 1 month after the investigation's findings were released, Dr. Sarah Mitchell stood on a stage at the National Convention Center in Atlanta. Before her sat a diverse crowd of over 1,000 people, executives, aviation professionals, civil rights leaders, and industry stakeholders. Today, we're not just talking about change, Sarah announced, her voice strong and clear. We're making it happen. She pressed a button, and behind her, a large screen displayed the logo of her new initiative, Equal Skies, Aviation Justice Project. The audience watched as Sarah unveiled her comprehensive plan. Her tech company, Tech Vision Solutions, had committed $10 million to start the foundation. More surprisingly, 15 other major companies had joined her, bringing the total funding to $100 million. This isn't charity, Sarah explained, clicking to the next slide. This is an investment in fairness and future growth. When we open doors that were previously closed, everyone benefits. In the front row, Sarah spotted the young barista from the airport terminal, now dressed in a business suit. After her viral video, she had become one of the first team members of the Equal Skies project, bringing her first-hand experience of witnessing discrimination. Linda Weber stood up next to present the business case. Companies that have already adopted our new equality protocols have seen a 40% increase in minority executive clients, she reported. Discrimination isn't just wrong, it's bad for business. Tom Patterson then shared the Private Aviation Association's new requirements. Starting next month, all member companies must implement standardized security protocols. No more unofficial policies or profile-based screening. The movement was growing faster than anyone had expected. Sarah's phone buzzed with a message from Rachel. 3 more Fortune 500 companies want to join the initiative. They're offering another $30 million in funding. Sarah invited civil rights lawyer Marcus Johnson to the stage. We've already started free legal clinics at 10 major airports, he announced. Anyone who faces discrimination can get immediate legal support. No more suffering in silence. The Foundation's first major project was already underway, a training academy for minority aviation professionals. The program would provide full scholarships for pilot training, aviation management, and security services. By this time next year, Sarah continued, we'll have trained 500 new aviation professionals, but more importantly, we're changing the culture of private aviation. In the audience, several people wiped tears from their eyes as Sarah shared stories from their database of discrimination experiences. Each story strengthened their resolve to create lasting change. Our app launches next week, Sarah demonstrated on the big screen. Users can report incidents, find support, and track their complaints. Every report helps us identify patterns and target problems. The young barista, now introduced as Michelle Carter, took the stage to announce the mentorship program. We're connecting experienced aviation professionals with newcomers to the industry, she explained. Breaking into exclusive spaces is easier when someone holds the door open for you. Sarah smiled, remembering how her own parents had held doors open for her through their sacrifices. Now she was doing the same for others on a larger scale. The convention center buzzed with energy as people signed up for various initiatives. Companies pledged support, professionals offered mentorship, and lawyers volunteered their services. This movement isn't about punishment, Sarah emphasized near the end of her speech. It's about progress. We're not trying to tear down an industry, we're making it better, stronger, and fairer for everyone. The screen behind her showed the faces of the first class of scholarship recipients, 50 diverse individuals who would begin their aviation training next month. Their dreams of flying private jets or managing aviation services were finally within reach. As Sarah concluded her presentation, she noticed something remarkable. The room wasn't divided into separate groups anymore. Industry executives sat next to civil rights activists, pilots chatted with lawyers, and everyone was focused on the same goal. One incident at an airport terminal sparked this movement, Sarah said in her closing remarks. But it's your commitment that will keep it growing. Every person in this room has the power to open doors for others. The standing ovation lasted for 5 minutes. As Sarah looked out over the crowd, she saw not just applause but real commitment to change. Her phone was already filling with notifications of new pledges, partnerships, and promises of support. Outside the convention center, news crews waited to cover the launch of Equal Skies. But the real story wasn't in the press releases or public announcements. It was in the determination she saw in every face in that room, each person ready to play their part in transforming an industry. The movement had begun, and there was no turning back. 6 months after the launch of Equal Skies, the private aviation industry looked remarkably different. Dr. Sarah Mitchell stood at the window of her new office at JFK International Airport, watching as the first graduating class of the Equal Skies Training Academy performed their final flight tests. Dr. Mitchell, her assistant Rachel, called. "The industry report just came in. You're going to want to see these numbers." Sarah turned from the window to review the document. The statistics told a story of rapid transformation. 80% of private aviation companies had completely overhauled their security protocols. The standardized screening process, now known as the Mitchell Protocol, had been adopted at 95% of private terminals nationwide. "Look at this," Rachel pointed to a highlighted section. "Discrimination complaints are down by 75% since last quarter, and minority executive bookings have increased by 60%. The changes weren't just on paper. As Sarah walked through the terminal later that day, she saw the physical evidence of transformation. New security stations had clear, posted guidelines. Security staff wore body cameras. Every checkpoint had QR codes linking to passenger rights information. James Henderson, the guard who had discriminated against her, had unknowingly become a case study in what not to do. His training video was now shown at every aviation security course across the country, teaching officers how to recognize and avoid discriminatory behavior. "Ma'am," a young black security officer approached Sarah. "I just wanted to thank you. I got my job through the Equal Skies program. There are 15 of us here now, and more coming next month." Sarah smiled, remembering how empty these corridors had been of diversity just months ago. The security team at this terminal now reflected the real world. People of all backgrounds working together professionally. Her phone buzzed with a message from Tom Patterson. "Board meeting just ended. All 25 major private aviation companies have met the new diversity requirements. It's official. No more exceptions or extensions." The changes had cost the industry millions, but the returns were already showing. Private aviation bookings were up 30% overall, with new clients from previously untapped markets driving much of the growth. Linda Weber's latest report showed another surprising trend. Companies that had embraced the changes most enthusiastically were seeing the biggest financial gains. Their reputations had improved, attracting not just minority clients but also younger executives who valued social responsibility. "Dr. Mitchell," a voice called out. It was Michelle Carter, the former barista, now dressed in a pilot's uniform. "We just finished training the 150th security team. Every single private terminal in New York now has at least 3 Equal Skies certified officers." The transformation went beyond security. The Equal Skies Training Academy had already graduated its first class of pilots, aviation managers, and ground crew. These professionals were quickly being hired across the industry, changing its face from the inside out. Sarah's phone lit up with another notification. The Aviation Board had just approved the final version of the new industry standards. Starting next month, every private aviation company would need to meet strict equality requirements to maintain their operating licenses. The insurance companies finally caved, Rachel announced, reading from her tablet. They've eliminated the discriminatory pricing policies. Some are even offering discounts to companies that exceed the new diversity requirements. Walking through the terminal, Sarah noticed the small but significant changes. The magazines in the lounges showed diverse faces on their covers. The art on the walls celebrated aviation pioneers of all backgrounds. Even the snack bar offered foods from various cultures. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was a message from a black executive who had just completed his first private flight since the changes. "Walked through security without a single extra question. Felt like a human being. Thank you." The terminal manager approached with more good news. "Our customer satisfaction scores are at an all-time high," she reported. "And not just among minority clients. Everyone appreciates the clear, fair processes." Sarah checked her watch. In an hour, she would board a private jet to Chicago for another industry meeting. But this time, she knew the experience would be different, not just for her, but for everyone who followed. As she watched another group of Equal Skies trainees practicing their security protocols, Sarah reflected on how much had changed. The industry that had once been a symbol of exclusion was transforming into a model of equality. Her phone showed one last message for the day, from her mother. "Baby, I just flew private for the first time. The security officer was so professional. You did this. You changed things." Sarah smiled, knowing that this was just the beginning. The aviation industry had proven that real change was possible when people committed to doing what was right, not just what was easy. 1 year to the day after the incident that started it all, Dr. Sarah Mitchell stood in the same private terminal where she had once been discriminated against. The space was transformed, not just physically but in its entire atmosphere. "Welcome to the first annual Equal Skies Summit," Sarah announced to the packed terminal. The building that had once been a site of discrimination had been converted into the Equal Skies Foundation's headquarters, with the terminal serving as a training center and meeting space. Looking out at the audience, Sarah saw faces that told the story of real change. Michelle Carter, the former barista, was now the director of training for Equal Skies. She had personally overseen the certification of over 1,000 aviation professionals. In just 1 year, Sarah continued, pulling up the statistics on the large screen, we've trained 500 new pilots, 750 aviation managers, and 1,200 security personnel. But numbers don't tell the whole story. She gestured to the walls, where photos showed the graduates of their programs. Young people from all backgrounds who had never dreamed of careers in private aviation were now working at terminals across the country. Tom Patterson stood up to share the industry data. "Private aviation bookings have increased by 45% this year," he reported. "Our industry isn't just more fair, it's more profitable than ever." Linda Weber followed with her presentation. "The Mitchell Protocol is now being adopted by commercial airlines and international aviation companies," she announced. "What started here is spreading globally." Sarah's phone buzzed with a message from Rachel. "The president just signed the Aviation Equality Act. The changes you started are now law." The young security officer who had thanked Sarah 6 months ago was now a chief of security at a major terminal. He had trained dozens of other officers, spreading the principles of fair treatment and professional service. "But our biggest achievement," Sarah said, her voice filled with emotion, "isn't in the numbers. It's in the stories we don't hear anymore, the stories of discrimination, exclusion, and humiliation that used to be so common." The audience nodded in understanding. Many of them had their own stories of discrimination, but now they were part of the solution. James Henderson, the guard who had discriminated against Sarah, had unexpectedly become part of the story's legacy too. After losing his job, he had gone through a journey of self-reflection. Today, he worked with Equal Skies as a speaker, sharing his story of learning and change. Dr. Mitchell, a young black girl, approached the stage with a model airplane in her hands. "I want to be a pilot because of you. My mom says I can do anything now." Sarah smiled, remembering her own childhood dreams. She invited the girl onto the stage and handed her the microphone. "Tell everyone what you want to be," she encouraged. "I want to fly private jets," the girl announced confidently, bringing tears to many eyes in the audience. The Equal Skies Foundation had become more than just an aviation program. It was a model for how to transform an entire industry. Other exclusive industries, from luxury hotels to private clubs, were now seeking their guidance on implementing similar changes. 1 year ago, Sarah said in her closing remarks, "I stood in this terminal and faced discrimination. Today, we stand here together as proof that change is possible, but our work isn't finished." She unveiled the Foundation's new 5-year plan, expanding internationally, developing new training programs, and creating scholarship opportunities for the next generation. The audience rose in a standing ovation as Sarah introduced the next class of Equal Skies trainees, 200 diverse faces, each carrying dreams that would have seemed impossible just a year ago. Outside the terminal, private jets took off and landed, their passengers experiencing a new kind of luxury travel, one where excellence and equality flew together. Sarah's phone showed one final message for the day, from her father. "Baby girl, you didn't just open doors, you built new ones, and you made sure they'll stay open for generations to come." As the summit concluded, Sarah watched the sunset through the terminal windows. The same sun that had witnessed her discrimination a year ago now shone on a transformed industry. The incident that could have been just another story of discrimination had instead become a catalyst for lasting change. The legacy wasn't just in the changed policies or new faces in the industry. It was in the belief, now proven true, that when one person stands up for what's right, they can transform not just a moment, but an entire future. And somewhere in the skies above, another Equal Skies graduate was piloting their first solo flight, proving that the sky truly was the limit for everyone now.